Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, we've been at war in Ukraine, or at least Russia has, for quite some time now, over 100 days. Where does the war stand at this point?
So as we know, much of the war going on is contained in the eastern part of Ukraine, the Donbas region. And so Russia has been focused on this region for now months. And so they previously tried to topple the capital in Kyiv. That failed, and they sort of refocused their efforts in the Donbas on a much smaller scale. And so they're slowly but surely gaining territory as they push through the Donbas. But again, we're talking about a slow pace. We're talking weeks and weeks now. And so it really, even though they are making some progress, it really is at a much slower pace than expected, both ahead of the war and in the beginning stages.
So obviously there have been a number of Russians who've been put on trial, and there are war crimes allegations and war crimes trials that have been taking place, but the Russians have made some allegations of their own against the Ukrainians, and there's some concern that we might be about to see show trials put on by the Russian government. What can you tell us about that?
So what we've seen so far is we saw 3 foreign nationals this week, two Brits and a man from Morocco who had been living in Ukraine and joined the Ukrainian military. Be charged.
There have been a number of foreign nationals who've come to fight on behalf of the Ukrainians.
Exactly. And so these are actually gentlemen who have lived there, but they still have dual citizenship at a minimum. And so these gentlemen were fighting on behalf of Ukraine, and they were captured by the Russians. Specifically, they're in the Donbas region. And given that they now have control over so many areas, they've actually charged these 3 with essentially trying to overthrow the government. Now, again, we're talking about a pro-Russian court talking about Ukrainians trying to overthrow the puppet government that they have installed there. And so there was a meeting today among Kremlin officials, and according to a readout, there are thousands, I believe 11,000 cases like these 3 of Ukrainians who have been arrested and are being detained by Russia in Ukrainian soil, who could face trials. And as you mentioned, these are sham trials. Simultaneously, we're seeing a dual narrative between the war crimes investigations that Ukraine is going through, and they're holding Russians responsible for their actions. There's concern that these sham trials will continue to take place.
So in addition to the Russian war in Ukraine, there have been some developments with the Iran nuclear deal. There have been negotiations to rejoin a nuclear deal that was concluded by the Obama administration, from which the United States withdrew under the Trump administration. And the Biden team has been trying pretty hard to revive this deal and revive U.S. participation in it. But there have been some unfavorable developments to that goal.
Absolutely. So earlier this week, Iran announced that they were going to shut off nearly all of the IAEA, which is the UN's watchdog agency for this specific purpose. They were going to shut off essentially all of their monitoring equipment. And so the head of the IAEA said earlier this week that this could be considered a fatal blow if they aren't able to restore this monitoring capabilities within the next 3 to 4 weeks, which is the timetable he set forth. And so while the administration has been very hard pressed to rejoin, they really are sort of in a no-win position right now because it doesn't look like it's coming to fruition at this point.
Because that's basically the whole purpose of the Iran nuclear deal. We relieve Iran of some of the sanctions that the West has imposed and allow them to engage in some nuclear activities in exchange for us being able to monitor those activities to make sure they're not developing nuclear weapons.
Exactly. And so we've heard from different watchdog agencies that said they could be close in the near future to developing a nuclear weapon. And so there is added emphasis or added pressure on the Biden administration to either come to an agreement, get Iran to the table, or figure out a way to stop them.
And the other interesting aspect of this is that Russia is a party to these negotiations.
Absolutely. And the other thing to mention is both of these are playing together, as well as all of the cameras being shut off. It really is the UN without sort of a mechanism to enforce what they sort of want.
And there have been some concerns that maybe this isn't exactly a revival of the Iran nuclear deal from 2015, but it may be something even weaker?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we really don't know exactly what the negotiations are looking like, especially because even as the Biden administration remains steadfastly in support of rejoining this, we're seeing Tehran not live up to its end of the bargain that the U.S. wants to see.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.